Lucy Powell joins us, Labour MP and Shadow Business Minister, to discuss a lot of the day's biggest stories, but also crucially the future of the UK steel industry, as of course we see more and more pressure on the Liberty Steel threatening some 3,000 jobs here in the UK. Good morning to you, Lucy.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us on a bank holiday. Much appreciate anyone else who's working on a bank holiday when no one else is. Let's talk about Liberty Steel and what happens in the future there, because we have seen, obviously it's all very much linked to these claims regarding the financiers, Greenhill and their collapse, and David Cameron and allegations of undue influence and the like. But your concern really is that our steel production has nosedived over the last decade.
Yes, I mean, it's been a very difficult time for our steel industry. And to be fair to Liberty and Gupta, who owns them, he's actually gone against the grain and invested in his plants across the UK. And it's because of that investment and the debts that's accrued that he's now finding huge difficulty with his businesses. And that is a really uncertain time for those workers, but also the suppliers, of which there are many more thousand jobs there as well, and customers too, who would have to get their steel from elsewhere. But this is, I'm afraid, a story of long-term decline in our steel industry. And we've been calling recently on the government to really get on top of this now and come forward with a proper forward-looking plan for steel, because it's absolutely critical to not just our economy, but our national security, that we are able to produce our own steel on our own shores. And there should be a vibrant future for steel, because we've got all these big infrastructure projects coming up the road. So if we had a Buy British guarantee, if the government stepped up and helped steel to transition to green, and had that extra support there that was needed, that I think there's a bright future for British Steel, but it does need more government action than we've seen over the last few years.
Well, I mean, it's one thing the last year has taught us, that being self-reliant in a lot of things is absolutely crucial. But it's long been a massive national security issue, hasn't it? This need to keep up our steel industry, and indeed a lot of these skilled, not just that they're having the factories and the plants, but actually the skills of homegrown workers, to make sure we need those in the event of any other world issues. But is it, I mean, without state help, is it nigh on impossible for industries like the steel industry to survive when you have got the mass dumping of hugely subsidised steel by the Chinese? I mean, they've carried out a deliberate policy. I mean, billions and billions and billions of pounds going into making steel far, far more cheaply than anyone else in the world can do, dumping it on the world market. Steel prices collapse. Without state subsidy, can any steel makers actually survive without government help?
I think they can. And actually, I think some of the Liberty Steel plants have shown that if you invest in steel properly and you are at the cutting edge of the new technologies, that transition to green. So many of the Liberty plants have gone to electric arc furnaces, really cutting edge. And that specialised steel manufacturer that we really do excel in here in this country, then I think there is a vibrant future. But you make a really important point, that there are states around the world, states that have other motives in mind, who are undercutting that global market in steel. And I think that makes it all the more important that the government has a more interventionist approach here, because otherwise, if it's left to the market, we will lose our steel production, and then we'll be wholly reliant on the Chinese and others. And then, as we can see, there's an increasing sort of trade war with the Chinese. And then, frankly, we're pretty buggered, aren't we? Really?
That's a fair summary, I think.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Boris Johnson. Yesterday, I was talking about we've got things like HS2. It'd be crazy, he said, not to be using British steel in that circumstance. Do you think that bodes well, that actually there will be some financial help at some point?
Well, as usual with Boris Johnson, he's strong on the rhetoric, but he's very, very short on the reality. And it needs more than just warm words. There is huge potential with these infrastructure projects, but we don't have a stronger Buy British guarantee at the moment. At around 25% of steel is got from abroad for these projects, so that could be reduced significantly. He needs to stand by the industry. There was no mention of steel in the government's plan for growth recently that was published alongside their budget, not a single mention of it. And they've recently scrapped all notion of an industrial strategy, which steel production really would be at the heart of such an industrial policy. So, he can say the right things for the TV cameras, but the reality is he's not doing the steps that it takes to support our steel industry in the long term, make it an environment that businesses can invest in, and then the immediate challenge of supporting Liberty Steel workers, suppliers and customers.
Okay, can I also ask you about another story that's on the front page of the papers today about vaccine passports? 72 MPs, including a number of Labour MPs, including former leader Jeremy Corbyn, have basically signed up, and along with Liberal Democrats as well, who've come out openly against this, against the idea of vaccine passports as being divisive and discriminatory. Your leader, Sir Keir Starmer, earlier in the week did actually do an interview in which he described the issue of vaccine passports as something that was against his instinct. He said it was against British instinct to have a vaccine passport. We're told that despite the consultation ending only on Monday of this week, we're already going to be seeing trials going ahead for the football semi-final. Well, was it the FA Cup? Not FA Cup. What is it? The Euro semi-finals and the finals, and also the World Snooker Championships. Do you think that we should go ahead with vaccine passports to get life back to normal, or is that a price too high to pay?
Well, I think, as Keir said earlier in this week, it is a complex issue, but I think he's right to say that it goes against some of our instincts, and I think it goes against some of the science around community protection, which is what the vaccine programme is ultimately about. Yes, it is about protecting individuals, but it's actually about providing that broader community protection. But I think if there is a way that for some of the larger events, that this can help sort of support some of the larger events begin to happen sooner rather than later, then it is worth looking at. But I think the idea of a wholesale use of this, that somehow sort of half compulsory, but then half really being put on the shoulders of pub landlords and others to police, I don't think that would be a good place for us to get to. No. So perhaps some way of enabling large events.
How does it work for large? How does someone have a vaccine passport for a large event but not for a small event? Once you've actually got the vaccine passport, people are going to then demand it, are they not? And if the government says things like, well, you have to have social distancing and one-way systems and masks and all of that in a pub where you don't have a vaccine passport, but you can have tables close together and everyone dancing on tables having a great time again in a pub with vaccine passports, then there's going to be an awful lot of pressure, isn't there? I mean, the key thing here is there is a practical issue, there is a privacy issue, and there is an ethical issue. The idea that we should have to show proof of our medical status in order to go about our daily business in what was, until a year and a bit ago, a free, democratic, liberal nation. Why? I mean, I'm horrified that the government is considering this. I am buoyed up that so many MPs are actually coming forward and saying they propose it, and I was buoyed up that Keir Starmer at least started questioning it. But why does the Labour Party find it so hard to come off the fence on this and just say this is ethically wrong? It's completely un-British. That's not how we do things. The vaccine rollout is going brilliantly. Enough people will be vaccinated. That our freedom is a price worth paying, is that we are not going to have vaccine passports. We don't want to live in a state like China. We have totalitarian control of everything that our population does, and that we want to go back to the old normal as soon as possible. Why does Labour not want to just come off the fence and say that?
Well, to be fair, I think Keir did say that quite clearly the other day. I mean, maybe we're talking at slight cross purposes, because I think for larger events, I wouldn't be describing a so-called vaccine passport, but more an ability for people to be tested beforehand and so on, a combination of all of those things to enable those larger events. But I do agree with you that there are serious ethical, practical and logistical issues with vaccine passports being required for people to go about their daily business. And as I say, the issue really here is that if the vaccine rollout continues in the way that it does, it provides the community level protection that we're all requiring, rather than that individual level protection,
Absolutely.
which is, people shouldn't confuse the two.
Lucy Powell, great to talk to you as always. Have a great Easter weekend. Shadow Business Minister Lucy Powell there. Dave Chawner is a comedian. He's joining me all this morning. Quick word from you on this. I mean, I say, as much as you and I want to just talk about chocolate Easter eggs all day, vaccine passports is a really big issue, isn't it? It's incredible how much public support there is for them. But I think a lot of that public support is predicated on people really not understanding what they mean. But they're thinking, well, I've got my vaccine, I've got my little card, I'll take it out of my wallet, I'll show it, and life will go back to normal, and otherwise it won't. I'll do my bit. I don't think people really realise quite how much invasion of privacy it will end up being, and that it's not going to be just a little piece of paper. It's going to be something you're going to have to show everywhere you go for everything you do.
And where does it start? Because I genuinely saw an article the other day of whether pets will need a COVID passport and a COVID vaccine. And you're just like, wow, this is 1984.
Well, we are definitely in 1984 territory. I mean, basically, if we were led into lockdowns by a totalitarian police state in China, I think that was a bad move. And we're being led into vaccine passports, and medical records are being demanded at will by the state or by anyone else who wants it under the auspices of the state. That's also what China has done. I mean, let's learn some lessons pretty quickly on this, guys, without actually needing to have a formal review and public inquiry. Let's learn the lessons that when China does it, it's a general rule, maybe not a good idea.